Interesting thing about this story that we just read in John's Gospel is that it is recorded in all of the Gospels, and they're all different as to whose house it was in, who was there, what was said, and on and on. So we're going to stick with John's version today, and he has it happening in the house of Martha, Mary, and their brother Lazarus, who 1 week ago was pulled out of a cave after being dead 4 days. So he kind of smells. Things in the house are probably not smelling too good. And they invite Jesus, who's come to Bethany, to have dinner with them. And Lazarus is sitting at the table with them. And as you heard, Mary goes and gets a pound of nard. This is very expensive perfume. She melts it, and she anoints Jesus' feet with it, wipes them with her hair. And Judas, and I don't know why Judas was there because none of the other disciples seem to be there, but he's there, and of course he says, why wasn't this perfume sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor? And I want to say right off the bat, I don't agree with John about what he said about Judas. He said, well, Judas said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he carried the common purse and he used to steal from it. I don't believe that. I don't think Judas was the one who stole money. I think he had a very logical statement there. It is very true that could have been sold and the money given to the poor, but this wasn't the time to be frugal in the mind of Jesus. This was the time to be extravagant. Why? How many of you are extravagant? How many of you are frugal? I thought you'd all be in between because you're Anglicans, but good, you've got both, right? Do you like being extravagant? Yeah? Okay, good for you. We need more extravagant people. Well, I think that Judas is right, and I think Mary is right. And so now we have to kind of reconcile the two. I have 3 things I want to say about this little story. And first off, I want to talk about what Mary did. What Mary did was she gave the very, very best that she had, and she gave it to Jesus while he was still living. She didn't keep it until he died and then made this presentation to him in memoriam. She did it while he was living. And I think that this is a very, very important part of the story. Because what came to my mind when I reread this story this week was, I do an awful lot of funerals in my time, and I hear wonderful eulogies at these funerals, and I always think, I hope you told this person these things before they died. I hope you didn't wait till now to say it. I hope you were able to say it to them before they died. We don't want to be in a position after somebody's died and said, gee, I wish I'd have told them this. Don't want that. You want to be able to say things to people while they're living and do things for people while they're living. I have been very fortunate in my life that with both my parents, I was with them when they died. And I was able to speak to them and tell them the things that I wanted to tell them. I especially and particularly remember my father, who was in Parkwood Hospital at the last part of his life. And I was fortunate because it was in the summertime. And so I used to go to see him in the afternoons, and I would take my dog with me because my dad loved dogs. He always had a dog. Anything time I remember in my life, there was always a dog in the house. So I would take my golden retriever, and if I could pry him away from the nurses who always wanted to grab him and take him down to other people, I'd finally go to him and say, he needs to go outside. And then I'd take my dad outside, and we'd sit in the gardens because my dad loved gardens. And so I would be on one side of him, and the dog would be on the other. And I'd hold his hand, and he'd pat the dog. And we had a great time talking about all of our life. We talked about our mom, we talked about the family, the kinds of things we did. And there were just times that we just sat there and held hands, and he pet the dog. I cherish that time, and I'm glad that I was able to say things to him while he lived. And I encourage you, if there's anyone in your life that there is something that needs to be said to them, say it now. Don't wait until they're gone. And that's one of the things that Mary shows us here today, is that she did this for Jesus while he was living. And the other part that comes from that is, I think, speaks to the church. It seems to me that over time especially, the church has really focused on the death of Jesus, not the life. We put an awful lot of time into his death and resurrection, and I think we need to spend more time talking about his life. And if you're wondering what I'm thinking about, I'm standing here looking at Jesus on the cross. Why is he on the cross? We're resurrection people. That cross should be empty. Another one over there. Why do we do that? We emphasize the death when we should be emphasizing his life. I'm going to take that down one day, and the only time I'm going to put it up is Good Friday, and then it's coming down. If I could get him off it without wrecking it, I'd take him off. I look at it every Sunday, and I think, why? So I think the church needs to think about why we emphasize the death so much and not the life. Because what Jesus left us was his legacy of the kingdom of God. And he did some remarkable things in his life. And we are left to spread that good news. And I know the death's important, and I know the resurrection is important, but it's not near as important as his life. So we need to really concentrate on that one. Now the third point I want to make is this whole business of extravagance and frugality. Is that a word, frugality? I think I could spell that. I asked how many of you were extravagant and how many of you were frugal. There's a time and place for both, I think. And what I think is important here is to think about times in our life when we have been extravagant and times in our life when we have been frugal. And the questions we need to ask ourselves in Lent is, when have we been frugal when God has been extravagant to us? And we need to figure out times when we can be more extravagant than we are, because if we always want to hold on to things and not give them away, we'll have a hard time sharing what we have. And so the answer to this question about, what should we give away and how extravagant we can be is different for all of us, because we all have different gifts and talents. And those talents are supposed to be shared and given away, and only you can decide how that's done. The difference between Mary and Judas was the way in which, the lens through which they saw life. And in this particular moment, and I won't say this is always true of Judas, but in this particular moment, Judas saw scarcity. He thought we needed more. We don't have enough. I'm looking after the money here. We need more. We should have taken that money and put it into the coffers and helped the poor. He sees scarcity. Mary sees abundance. She sees abundance. She's not worried about that part because it's important for her to give that to Jesus while he lives. So what you need to ask yourselves is, what is the lens by which I look at the world? Is it through scarcity or is it through abundance? You need to ask yourself that question. And what I want to encourage you to do this Lent, as you move towards, we journey towards Jerusalem next week and move through Holy Week, is to think about the times that you have been extravagant. How did you feel? Who were you extravagant with, to? And can you be more extravagant than you are? It's interesting, isn't it, that we have wills. And we write them out, and, Joe's going to get this, and Sally's going to get that, and they're going to get this. Wouldn't it be nice if we could do the will while we're living, and we give them this stuff now? Like, not everything, but, we've got lots, haven't we? And we save it, and we're gone, and they get out the will and say, oh, Dad gave you this, and Mom gave you that, and I got this. Why don't we give them some of it now when they really need it? Think about that. How hard would that be? And I would ask you this now, to be so extravagant with someone in the next while that somebody might come up to you and say, are you crazy? And if they say that to you, you've been properly extravagant. Now, here I go defending Judas again, but I really believe that Judas wasn't bad here. He asked a very logical question. Yes, he was right. It could have been sold. But for now, what Jesus was saying, for now, we can be extravagant with me because I'm not always going to be here with you. And Mary has recognized that, so leave her alone. And I think that's the challenge for us. The challenge for us is to be able to distinguish when it is we should be extravagant and when it is maybe we should be frugal. And for me, in the church, I think the church can be much more extravagant in our evangelizing about the kingdom of God. We need to emphasize the life of Jesus, not so much the death, because what he did in life was far more important than how he died.